governments and cities, local action. So the next session is entitled the Human Implementation Cookbook. This is a taste session where we will be talking about expanding the need-based climate innovation across diverse global city contexts. So for this session, I would like to invite our friend and moderator this time is Jorn Verbeeck. He's affiliated to KPMG, but he's been one of the founders of the Global Innovation Hub and driving us the way, showing us the way on how to engage with city and what are the needs and how can we really be very impactful with the city's climate agenda. Jorn, welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I almost started blushing with that intro. Please take a seat so that we can kick off for this very last session of this year's COP. So what's on the menu for today in this last session? Many of you have been at COP for many days now, heard lots of stories, lots of presentations, lots of solutions, I hope, because I keep getting questions from friends, family, how is COP? How is it going? And usually the question relates to the negotiations. And therefore I hope later today, tomorrow, there will be promising news. But at the same time, I feel a bit in the media that it's only focused on negotiations. And when walking around in the pavilions, there's so many good things happening, not only in the Innovation Hub, of course in the Innovation Hub, but also in all the other pavilions, everything that is happening, like bottom-up initiatives, many culturally different initiatives. Just so many solutions that are often still fragmented, but where there's a lot of potential to really move towards this net zero, sustainable, resilient, and just future. Just to kick us off with, one image that keeps helping me to, as a bit of a North Star in all my thinking and all my working together with many colleagues, and you'll hear some voices later today, is still where we are now. And lots of the discussions the last 2 weeks were on Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals. Are we still capable of making them by 2030? And I think if I look, coming back to my introduction, at everything what is happening here at COP, those many initiatives, and on the other hand, those long-term ambitions, where we want to become net zero by 2050, I think there's still a gap. And to make it really tangible, if we look at negotiations, a lot of attention going towards them, of course, fortunately, but we still talk about 1.5, whether it's still feasible. On the other hand, there's fears of 2.7, even 3.2, based on science, of course, but also on policy ambition and policy commitment. And I think on the other hand, we miss a bit in those negotiations the feedback from everything what is happening bottom up, all those initiatives that are taking place, to see how can they feed into all the negotiations to make sure that it's not only based on science and policy agreements, but also the work that is happening on the field. So therefore, I think challenge on our table, also in Innovation Hub, with many colleagues, how are we going to bridge that missing middle where we need to make that connection between bottom-up and top-down. Talking for a moment on behalf of the Global Covenant of Mayors, my former employer, and Andy, who's here in the room, will speak to you later. I think there's a really good approach. When we talk about how to address the missing middle, I think it's a question on how do you enter into complexity. Everything related to climate, sustainability is a really complex challenge. And I think it's a question on, there's so many actors involved, there's so many regions, so many different perspectives that come together. How do you enter into that complexity? And I think what the Innovate for Cities initiative did within the Global Covenant of Mayors is try and look at a number of topics, and you'll see them in the second ring. So for example, finance, informality, uncertainty, history and cultural heritage, to name but a few, but also to go cross-sector, and that's the inner ring. How do we go about justice and equity? How do we go about city-level models and data? How do we go about health, governance, scale, but also a system approach, of course. And I think the way we can do that is to look at partnerships, to look at co-production, and also to empower cities to really take action. And I think that will be core in the talk for me today, the aspect of cities. Why cities? I think it has been mentioned a couple of times in the hub, but also in other pavilions. If we look at all the complexity, cities are still the places for me where policy hits the ground, where practice, where climate effects become tangible, become visible, but where there's also the creativity to come and find solutions. Now, in the hub, we've been working, as said, with many actors on how do we focus more not only on problems or on complexity, but also on core human needs. And I think there it's really important to start looking at how do we go from emissions to solutions, and on the other hand, how do we go from sectors, if we want to go cross-sector, cross-silo, and to go towards more implementation, as was central in this COP, to core human needs. The only thing, and that's the, I think, healthy discussion in the working group, this is still simplification of reality. It's nice to put something in a visual that everybody at least understands, or it's provoking thoughts and action, thinking, what can I do with this? What does that mean for my day-to-day work? But it's maybe still a bit too static. Let me explain why. This is just one example of the food system. And you can come and argue with me that it's not complete or that it's still too complex. But for me, it's a good conversation starter to say, this could be a visual representation of the food system, where we also have tried to look, and it's made by a friend of mine in Belgium from Shiften, what is the supply side, what is the demand side, and what are different entries, as just mentioned. For example, coming from a farming perspective, from an economic perspective, an environmental or a social perspective. Why do I show this slide? To just show if we want to embrace complexity, it's not a checkbox approach. It's thinking, what are intervention points? If you're a national government, a city, a bottom-up initiative, what is your place in there? And it's not about being right. It's about having a starting point to see how does it all interrelate, and to understand that if we want to change something to bridge that missing middle and to move towards those long-term goals, it's about working together with many actors, with many perspectives and dimensions, and to see how we work together, because the interrelatedness between all those elements is really high. But as said, that's for me just to show it's not a static approach, it's a dynamic process in how you find one another in that complex system. Then coming back to cities, because food is only one challenge, of course. In a city, you see many societal challenges coming together. What was striking for me, and we've had a number of urban-related panels in this hub, but also in many other pavilions. If you talk to a policymaker, they will look at a city as it's an administrative or policy level. If you talk to people here at COP, they will say, no, a city is a city of people. It's where we live, it's where we love, it's where we have kids, where we go to work. If you talk to the private sector, they will say, no, a city is an asset and investment portfolio. A mayor is important, but it's another way of looking at a city. If you talk to many of those youngsters here the last couple of days, they will say, well, a city is just a hotbed of creativity. It's a startup innovation lab where we can test things, where we can show that answers and solutions are possible. But at the same time, it's also an urban metabolism. Coming back to food, where many flows pass through, whether you talk about the built environment, whether you talk about water, whether you talk about food, whether you talk about textile and fashion, it's an urban metabolism. And I think it's really important when we talk about cities to take all these different perspectives into account, because if not, we're not going to find one another when we talk about challenges and solutions. What does that mean? If we take those different perspectives, then it's also important to understand if we need to include all those actors, how do we find them? What's the language we use? What's the agenda and the vision they have? And what is the wording we need, the narrative we need to get them around the same table, to make sure that if we want to tap into that complexity, that we can talk about what is the private sector agenda, what are public needs, what are core human needs, what is a policymaker's vision on the short and the long term. And there it's important, coming on that just example of the food system, if we want to go into the process, that we start designing on the one hand a challenge portfolio, what is really recognizable when I'm a policymaker, to understand for the next 5 years where to invest, and to make sure that's almost a no regret measure, that you're sure that it will contribute to both the short and the long term, but you also start designing a solutions portfolio. It's not a portfolio that will be complete. It can be imperfect, it can be chaotic, but it's just a starting point to say the more solutions we put in there, the more there's a guidance to say, if you don't have any data, if you don't have any tools, if you face different societal challenges that overlap and interlink, to at least show you a solutions portfolio and say, this is your starting point. And it's only by doing that you'll probably refine the next steps. We kicked off the session with a cookbook. So you've all been wondering, why a cookbook? I've now been talking about still quite a lot of jargon, like we have challenges, solutions, transition, transformation, long-term, short-term, SDGs, you name them. I think the main question on the table ever since Glasgow, and when we said it should, the next COP, this one, the one in Egypt, be an implementation COP, how do we go there? And we try to make it as tangible, as visible, as recognizable as possible, to go across those different perspectives, whether you're public, private sector, innovator, financer, climate activist. What is the language that you all will recognize? And that's why we started to develop a cookbook that is a process, that is something that is quite organic, and where you can actually enter via many different topics or entries. I don't see the screen, but I'm hoping that there's by now 2 colleagues online, so I'm hoping to have Katherine Foster as well. Let's see. Hey, Katherine, good to see you. With also Pietro on the screen. Good morning, Pietro. Katherine, can I invite you to just walk us briefly through our cookbook? And then happy to pass the floor afterwards to Pietro to also make it tangible, because you will all say, okay, we have a cookbook, and now what? So, Katherine, if you walk us through, and then Pietro, how can we make that tangible for just one example challenge?
Thanks, Jorn, and hello, everyone. I wish I was still there in person. I'm Executive Director of the Green Digital Finance Alliance, but I've been actually collaborating with the UGIH since its outset last year under different hats. So I'm really pleased to be here and to have worked with this amazing group. And the approach to empower cities to design and engage in that local needs-driven and dynamic solution development really did evolve as this group project. Based on the notion that we were actually going to create a pilot. And we realized that whenever we were innovating or starting an innovation project for a city, we were making some key assumptions. We were starting with, in our example, GHG accounting, and our consortia had made key assumptions, and it took a few weeks to peel back the layers of those assumptions and frustrations of having no clear one process and too many recipes to choose from, none of which fit directly but could be drawn upon piece by piece to reveal what was possible. And then we came together to come up with these cookbook steps, which is very cyclical, in fact, and you can enter at any point in that cycle. And basically the idea is that instead of having a top-down set recipe where you have to have a specific budget, there's an assumption about who you're cooking for, what your kitchen capacity is, the idea, and a set recipe and set ingredients. The idea is to start somewhere in that process, for example, to conceptualize a menu of what a city needs based on the localized context and tools available. And then you assess your tools, your kitchen capacity, to see, okay, actually, what do we have available here, which isn't going to cost, blow the budget or include other facets that we may not have within our resources. And then you select a recipe that fits that kitchen capacity and who you're cooking for, how many people, how big is your city, what are the core elements, and look at the recipe and fit what ingredients you have. So looking your pantry and see, okay, we actually have most of the elements that are needed here in terms of data and processes and human resources and capacities, and we can actually start that process. But we may need a few additional ingredients, shall we say, a few additional capacities or elements that are necessary to make a project or an initiative move forward. And by doing so, we're able to create that first dish. And then you share that with the city, with the stakeholders, and see, what needs, if it needs a little more salt, if it needs a few other elements. And then we iterate around that, share the recipe, and update the menu for that city, and then share that process and that recipe for others, so that they can then iterate and actually develop it further. So the idea is that instead of a prescriptive top-down set recipe, you must cook this, that demands the right equipment, ingredients, budget, and understanding of who we're cooking for. The idea is to invite from a very flexible process and structure based on those core human needs, but the capacities of the city. But I think I would like to hand it over to Pietro because he leads our built environment, sustainable cities, garden cities initiatives, including across the EU with a number of EU-funded projects. And it was through dialogue with him that a lot of this was clarified. So Pietro, I would like to hand it to you.
Thank you very much, Katherine. Thank you very much, Jorn, and everybody in the room. It is my pleasure to present you here physical, let's say, application of the cookbook, because we've been designing the cookbook, but at the same time, we want to see it applied in reality. So at Green Digital Finance Alliance, where I lead the Urban Regeneration and Built Environment Program, we work on a number of EU-funded consortia projects, and I just want to, apply the lenses of the cookbook for ARV, which is a Climate Positive Circular Communities project. The aim of ARV is to demonstrate and validate attractive, resilient, and affordable solution that will significantly speed up the deep energy renovation and the deployment of energy and climate measures in the construction and energy industry. So to keep it very simple and to avoid, again, the jargon and the buzzwords, to really make it clear, I think, as Katherine mentioned, this step can be entered in at any entry point, the cookbook. But we could start, in this case, from the conceptualization of the menu, which in the case of ARV, of this project, was that we wanted to do deep renovation for social housing neighborhoods. So the project is EU-based in this case, so it's a bit EU-centric, but we wanted, the menu here was, we need solution to deeply renovate and retrofit social housing in Europe. Then we moving to the next step, we're like, okay, we need to assess the kitchen capacity. So in this case, we had to focus on the 6 climate positive circular communities that we wanted to create in Netherlands, Italy, Spain, Norway, Denmark, and Czech Republic. So with really different geographical settings, different meteorological and climate settings, but also, of course, cultural and industrial capacities in terms of renovation efforts. So we had to really go on the ground and see what were the possibilities there. So in this case, again, assessing the capacity of our cities, of our neighborhoods. And then, okay, we needed to select adaptable recipes. So we needed to have a proper overview of what were the local energy efficiency measures that were available. Buildings have a number of different possibilities to be heated up, to be provided with water, with energy, with insulation. So what were physically the opportunities in these different 6 climates and cities? And then we did a step backward. We said, okay, this is what we can have in the different cities that we were working on, but we want to shop for additional ingredients. So we want to look at the best practices everywhere in the world, learn from there, and bring it back home and put on the local lenses. So we thought we want to do this in a digital way. We want not just doing, an overview of what we have, but we want this to remain. So we created an open source and crowdsourced global catalog of enablers that we called Encyclopenergy. It is now a website, it is now a platform where anyone can contribute and input what are best practices in terms of business models, financial instruments, but also policy regulations when it comes to energy efficiency and energy flexibility in buildings. So we did this huge exercise. We collected more than 200 entries. We reviewed them, and we did the step back and said, okay, how can we, transfer this to our local situation in these 6 countries? So we shopped for innovative ideas around the globe in order to be, first of all, up to date, but also to see what were the best and most affordable options for our situations. And then now, as we speak, we are in the second year and a half of implementation of ARF. So we are in the moment of implementing and demonstrating. So in these 6 large demonstration sites, there is ongoing construction and retrofitting physical one. And this involves also, of course, the community, because people have to actually go out of their home in order to let the building to be retrofitted. So there is a huge human effort involved in terms of putting the people together, explaining what's going on, get them on board on why this is important for them, for the world, and for all of us. And when the plan is, of course, that while we do this, we assess, we measure, we monitor, we take all the lessons learned in order to then move to the next step and leverage and scale. So share our recipe. What has gone well? How can we improve it? How can other geographies, cities, neighborhoods apply this in their own settings, of course, being conscious of the traditional and the cultural setting of every single place. And so I wanted to show here a little bit how the cookbook is a framework, is a methodology that with this step-step approach in a simple way, it then unpacks all that complexity that Jorn was explaining at the beginning. Behind here, behind the simplification, there is a lot of complexity. So we came up with these steps because also in the reality, we have realized that they make a lot of sense. So with that, thank you very much. I just now hand it over again to the team at the hub.
Thank you very much, Pietro, and thanks for stressing that it's indeed a methodology, a process. So it's not a solution in itself. It's for us the way in the weeks and months to come. We've seen many great things here at COP to really take stock, to build that portfolio of solutions using that cookbook approach. And what I liked in your example is that you indeed say, we work together with many different countries. They have different culture. So the way they go about implementing solutions, or even the way they cook, is completely different. But at the same time, they know they need to have something on the table because there's a family to feed. And I think a last element to just make the link with the cooking parallel, it's also for us when we talk about core human needs, it's not putting something in your stomach because you're hungry. It's thinking about what is the nutrition on the long term that allows you to have a healthy life. And I think therefore the parallel with cooking, to better understand how are we going. Sometimes you don't have all the ingredients at home. Sometimes you can steal a recipe from the internet. It's not a manual. It's really a guideline to say, use whatever you have, but start cooking and learn from others so that you really go into that process. Now, apart from the countries you mentioned, we had also, at the very beginning of COP, a wonderful session with the city of Gojang. Katherine here with us. Katherine, can you also maybe share a reflection how this approach helps us to, they come from a totally different background, they come with a totally different proposal, how the cookbook can also help to get their solutions into that common process.
Thank you, Jorn. And it'd be great to get that circular slide up again. And I might just actually stand. So really excited to be here. As you said, Jorn, the first day we had Goyang City in Korea presenting on their work. And one of the things that's exciting is in 1 year's time with the hub, we've gone from, an initial hopes and dreams to actually doing the real work in this first year to start delivering on the promise of the hub. And I think this cookbook is an empowerment tool that can bring others, and there's been hundreds of people that have come through the hub in the last couple weeks, many of them from cities. And so the question is, how can they be part of this movement? And so I'd like to just talk a little bit about Goyang City and how they fit into this. So when you look at your conceptualizing your menu, that's really deeply understanding on the ground, what do people want? What are the gaps in their needs for shelter, for access, for nutrition? And we're trying to create an ecosystem for innovation focused on clean development to meet those needs. So one of the, I think, wonderful things about the hub is it's trying to create tools that allow others to do their own innovation. So when you assess your kitchen capacity, the Innovation Hub recognized that GHG accounting, which is just, you know, it's a lot of numbers, but the fact of the matter is it's your way of understanding your climate impact. And so Goyang City raised their hand to be a demonstration site to say, we'll spend the first year looking at how do we develop tools so that kitchen has more things in it. Because I think if you look at a lot of cities, there's a big difference between what tools they might have in that pantry. And some of that is wonderful to have a lot of diversity, but the role of the hub too is to create tools that people can use. And so I think the Goyang City work focusing on shelter in the first year was to say, how would you create a doable fit approach to GHG accounting? And they came back and reported on their first year's work. So I think that's an example of, you know, creating that pantry, creating tools for people. They are going to start looking, and I think this is the important thing, is oftentimes we look at GHG accounting and we kind of stop there, the baseline, and the whole point of the hub is we're trying to create new solutions. So it's not just your baseline, but what do you try next, and then what is the delta in terms of impact, not only on climate, but on meeting a human need. So Goyang City has got that baseline from first year, and next year they're beginning to look at how do you then look at solutions to their shelter challenges and then measure the impacts of those solutions. So we're creating a space for them to begin to look at multiple solutions to evaluate the impact on Goyang, and then also creating a dish, which would be a new approach to housing in their community, and then to decide, like, did it do what we wanted it to? Did it impact the GHG emissions reductions, but did it also actually meet the needs of people in their community? And to share that with the hub. And I just wanted to, the platform that the hub is building, the digital platform, is so that all of these circular learning experiences can then be put on that digital platform so others can come and look at a Goyang City with the shelter challenge had these things in its kitchen. It had to develop these capacities. It tried these things out. It engaged with new innovators. So I think it's a wonderful example of building that toolbox for cities to engage in this kind of cookbook approach.
Thank you very much, Katherine. I'm going to show you one last image just to bring it really down to the ground. We have talked about a process, we have talked about cities, but at the end of the day, it's coming. One more. One more. Very last one. There we go. At the end of the day, we're all humans. We go home again. This is from my hometown, Antwerp. What happened last year around this time of year is that a number of families in one street, this is just one example, put their favorite menu and how to cook it just on the window. If you walk through the street, you can see what different families are cooking. It's quite a multicultural street. Just to explore and find out what are you doing, because we all need to cook at some point throughout the day. But just to understand how do we go from this complexity to actually a multitude of solutions, and where we go from a polycrisis to multi-solving. And I think that will be key in the weeks and months to come if we do an evaluation of COP, and if we talk about was it a successful one or not. I think it's quite a complex question in itself, but to understand all these people that have been here, they're able, I think, to draw this image. I think it's our homework in the months to come to get all those recipes from those different people that were here at COP together and then make the evaluation of COP. Not just to say, did we achieve an agreement? It's really important. I don't want to put a comment on that, but to also see the other side of the COP and to see, did we manage as a harvesting of what came out of COP to bring all these solutions together in a really tangible way, and hence the parallel with the cookbook, in a way that you all understand, or at least can learn from, And if you're in a different region, country, culture, whatever, to say, this is not the ingredients I have in my region, but it's actually maybe inspiring to see what's the local ingredient of what I've seen on that window. And I think that for me is key towards the next COP, that we, in an open way, this is not something that we will keep in our cupboard, but in an open way, and we will share online via the hub to say, this is the portfolio of challenges, and on the other hand, the portfolio of solutions that we've come up with. And again, that's an invitation to keep adding, to say, it's not perfect, it's maybe not complete, but as an invitation to say, come and add, come in challenges. Do like Gojang and say, we think we have a story, we think we can contribute. We need more cities like that. And on that note, I think I want to ask a few more people here in front. Andy, please join us here. Carlos, can I invite you as well? Katherine? If we want to have more solutions, I think cities for me, but I'm a passionate city lover, of course. How do we use those cities that we often call not only hubs of problems, but more and more hubs of solutions? How do we involve them into that process? Because often there's still a lot of attention towards reporting, towards planning. How do we get all the cities into that process so that they understand it's a learning community? We don't have a perfect approach, but we can start just by doing, learning from one another.
Thanks, Jorn. Always intriguing as a Brit to be asked to play with cooking analogies, because many of you will know that many other European nations like to make jokes about the British and our cuisine. As some French colleagues of mine used to call me, fish and chips. Not everybody, though, wants to eat the same thing, and as much as when I do go back to the UK, now working in Brussels, not too far away from Jorn, then occasionally some fish and chips is nice, but there's a large expat community who make excellent Indian food in the UK. And it's something that I miss and isn't so good in Belgium. And I wanted to come back to your point about localizing the way in which we kind of conceptualize or think about cookbooks. It's all too easy to kind of overuse an analogy, but I think in this particular case, it does work quite well. And one of my takeaways from this COP is that the very individualized, localized solutions have been very prominent in a number of different sessions. In the first ever Urban Ministerial yesterday, in some discussions about subnational climate finance earlier in the week. Here in the hub, hearing from the city of Menez in Lebanon about local solutions to effectively capture and reuse rainwater, not just as a means of dealing with hydrological problems, but in their case, almost to create, in that particular example, artificial solutions that then become also a tourist spot, and to make them the most of integrating those solutions in nature. And there are many, 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 and our cookbook would be like an encyclopedia. But everybody needs to be able to take that and adapt that to their local circumstances. So one of the things that the Global Covenant of Mayors, various partners in the room, Dennis Pamlin and the MI Rise team and others have contributed to, is something called the Innovation Bridge. And what that tries to do is link those human needs to the Global Covenant of Mayors City Climate Action journey, to an understanding of fundamental human needs, and to map all of that together, link it together with some very pretty multicolored diagrams that will allow kind of anybody to work out at what stage of their climate action journey they are. This isn't all about well-advanced, high-capacity mega cities. It is about the city of Menez is like a few thousand inhabitants at best. It's not 5 million. And solutions need to be kind of adaptable to those different circumstances. And the bridge is not going to give you the answer, but it's going to help you locate kind of where you are within that ecosystem, and then be able to work out what your recipe might look like. I think we also need to look at opportunities for individual I'll play on the cookbook theme, ingredients to feature or not. She won't thank me for mentioning it, but you may have met one of our colleagues, Nina, who is not keen on spicy food at all. And the hotel that we're staying in here has an enormous breakfast buffet. And she took some eggs for breakfast, and then something in a pot next to it, wasn't quite sure what it was, took one mouthful and then nearly kind of choked on it because it had so much chili pepper in it. And I think we need to kind of identify that, you know, some people like that, like to wake up in the morning with a bit of a kick. Other people don't ever want that. And I think there are individual solutions that will work in certain contexts, but not others. And this isn't, again, just about Global North providing to Global South. We've talked a lot in the Innovation Hub about cities not just being the takers of solutions, but also the providers of solutions. And I'm enormously biased in favor of the cities that presented, but great to hear in the last few days also from the city of Hobart about some of their approach to wildfire management and the increased risk and vulnerability that climate change is bringing, but the way that that's being managed. There are many other Australian cities where that would work, but that doesn't necessarily translate totally in all parts of the world. So we need that recipe to be adaptable, but you know, you've heard me talk about it with Kirsten Nunlop forever and ever and ever. I think the kind of context is hugely important. But what we can't do, and we know well, Global Covenant of Mayors, a network of 12,500 cities, is provide bespoke support to absolutely everybody. Even if you had all the money in the world to spend on city climate action, you can't do what C40 is doing in 97 cities with 12,500. There aren't that many city climate experts around to be able to deliver that service. So taking a cookbook type approach that identifies those solutions, the role of some of the individual ingredients, says I do or don't want my food extra spicy or not, so I can adapt it accordingly, you know, then allows everybody to adapt. And there are resources out there to help, but I think listening to and hearing from those local leaders has been a really good kind of checkpoint along the way of that journey. And really one of the things that I've enjoyed the most over the past couple of weeks. I said to Icle in the local government pavilion yesterday, there have been so many more local government-led sessions at this COP, even than last year. And in the blue zone, the green zone, over in the climate action innovation zone, right here in this hub, we've been kind of nailing it. What we now need to do is get that translated into the main COP outcomes document, more than 2 words which were in Glasgow that talked about the role of subnational actors, to really be clear that there's a strong role to play in kind of making those solutions bespoke, but being able to scale them at a level that makes national governments really sit up and notice. And that's a bit like your one individual window versus the massive manufacturing plant that's somewhere the other side of Antwerp and churning out, you know, kind of lots of industrially manufactured food. And we need to be able to kind of bridge that scaling challenge. There you go, for starters.
Thank you very much, Andy. And there's 2 things I take out of there. One is that, as you said, we don't want people to come with a menu. We want people to come and say, I have only an ingredient or I have only a tool. You're more than welcome. If we want to go, as said, from the poly-crisis to the multi-solution, we need to accept people that say, I only have half an answer, but that half an answer will be important if we want to go in that complexity. The second element, I think, and that's what I really liked about your breakfast story with colleague Nina, the fact that we talk about cooking is opening up for just giving examples, providing a narrative and examples, a story where you feel that's how we relate, by telling a story and saying this is what happened. And I think that was missing for me the last couple of years in all this complexity discussions. How do we actually connect? And you see often people in the room nodding their heads saying like, I think I get it, but it's still not clear. And just by making the story around, it's not about the cookbook. We didn't want to launch a new concept. It's about getting the story, which we all feel is familiar, to then go what does that teach us? How do we go then to what is the challenge or the problem behind? So for next year's COP, and that's where I'm going to make the bridge to Carlos. Carlos, for next year's COP, and you've done an amazing job getting all of this together with all the UGIH colleagues, of course. I would like, of course, to see, and that's really personal, 2 weeks of cooking workshop rather than sessions. What do I mean by that? Is that we all bring those ingredients, those idea of menus, those idea of tools to say, you come to COP to work. We want to work with everything that you bring and start cooking together. I don't know how it's going to work yet. We still have a year to figure it out. But to really go into that process that people come and go home with something that they feel, now I put something on the table that was able to feed people, mentally, physically, whatever way. So happy to use that as a non-question to pass the mic to you. And I think a last element, we talk now about cities. You've been dealing with so many other topics. I think we can use the cookbook approach to much more than just cities. But just your quick reflections on the process, the cooking, what could it bring us?
Thank you, Jorn, and thank you to the working group on cities, the Global Innovation Hub working group on cities that have been working so hard to put together this framework that it's actually very smart and it's very easy to grasp. The way you put it using the cookbook is brilliant because it's very graphic and it's also it has a logical design. So you have 2 questions. Where do we want to go for COP28? Then you also wanted to see how this cookbook can be applied across the different themes of the Global Innovation Hub. But I wanted to add one more question that I was preparing when Andy was speaking, and this is how this all interconnects to the narrative of the Global Innovation Hub. So let me start from there. I mean, in a nutshell, the approach that we are trying to promote is to green the supply chain. That's what we are trying to do here. And for that reason, the city actors are key because cities are not only demand suppliers, but they are solutions providers. So we have the great opportunity really to add value by improving the development agenda or facilitating the development agenda of cities with a view to greener their value chain and make significant impact. And there is where we started working with you guys, particularly with the engaged with the option-based GAG accounting, Goyan, British Columbia, etc., to start understanding the huge potential cities can bring to the climate agenda only by adopting a wise consumption approach that is using a supply chain aligned with the 1.5. So this is, I think, how the equation looks like. And this cookbook is very smart because it gives a little bit the understanding on the opportunities that we have and the demand that the Global Innovation Hub to put over the table. When we started discussing this example, the analogy was very interesting because we started discussing where do we want to start. We want to start designing a dish that is possible with the current ingredients that we have, or do we want to dream on a menu and start collecting the ingredients after that? So I think this is a key question in our model, how we will be applying this framework. And my opinion is that actually we can move into these 2 different directions in parallel. It's only a matter of the time dimension that we want to take into account. And let me give you a practical example. My family has moved to a city, I'm from Bolivia, Santa Cruz de la Sierra, that in the 70s has less than 300,000 inhabitants. Today the city has 2 million inhabitants and it's continue expanding. So in one hand, we have to work with the ingredients that we have and support the city to design the best menu possible with what they have, and creating the networks, lessons learned, peer-to-peer exchange through the frameworks or through the networks that, for example, GCoM, as many others, is providing, is wonderful because they are starting to, for the first time, they just launched their first urban planning tool, and they started developing their maps and so on. So in this way they are cooking with ingredients that they have at the moment. But they have the potential, as Masamba said in a previous intervention, not to look only in decarbonizing their city, but to look really in a building a long-term plan and long-term vision that avoids emission, where it start looking to core human needs, start looking to smart and wise shelter approaches, nutrition and health, etc. So I think in that way they can dream on a menu and start building the ingredients together. What we would like to see at COP. So we moved from the dialogues in COP26, testing and verifying some of our assumptions. At this COP we are coming with more than 21 deliverables in a form of work plans and concrete commitments moving forward. One is the cookbook, the other is the beautiful work that was presented by Goyan, British Columbia, and others that are coming. And at COP28 we need to scale up. And we need to scale up those results and bring the volume, the number of factors. I think I will need to change microphone. I wasn't sure if I was running out of voice or microphone. But no, COP28 is the demonstration. We need to pilot test, and but also to find the ways to scale up what we already built. And I think this COP was absolutely crucial because we have in a way advanced with that demonstration, and now it's a matter of getting the key actors and start cooking together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Katherine, moving back to you, if I would ask you the same questions, what are next steps towards Dubai next year?
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for that. When Carlos gets up here and starts telling, I'm like, oh yeah, he understands exactly what we're supposed to be doing. I should be taking notes. I think that next year, as Carlos said, I think we have to expand the network of cities that see this perspective, needs-based and solution-oriented, as part of their DNA. Now, will they have made the transition? Is Goyang City now a completely different place to do, city planning? No, but it is taking a step and steps to change the way it thinks about the work that can unlock this needs-based approach. So I feel like having a set of cities that sees the Innovation Hub as a place where they are going on this journey and taking pieces of this, assessing their pantry so that we can actually understand, I think also the differences between places around the world. I think Goyang City is one on-the-ground context, but I think we need to be looking at all of the locations, especially in Global South, and learning from what that pantry looks like. What do they need us to help them build out? What will that journey look like? And I think that, to me, that's where we need to go in the next year. I also think linking this work to the digital platform and beginning to show that we're spinning off insights and learnings, and we're seeing them there for a much broader group of cities to learn from would be wonderful goals. And I just want to say, I didn't say the names of the people from Goyang that made this work happen. So Dr. Kwigong Kim and Dr. MJ Park and the mayor of Goyang City, I mean, we need those kinds of leaders to come together, and it'd be great to see teams to come together as well from cities so that we can see, you said that that perspective, I love that. Like, you've got the innovators, the financiers, the planners, and we need to see them all together.
We're in the last, I think, 5 minutes. I don't know if Katherine and Pietro are still with us online. There you go. You just hinted when we talked about scale also at the digital platform, and I think Katherine and Pietro, looking at you, digital is one element. One of the key topics at this COP, of course, was also on finance, and I think both of you are well placed when we talk about digital and finance to also give that last twist to next step when it comes to the cookbook? Who wants to go first? Katherine, can I pass to you?
Yes, actually, finance was the third of 3 points I wanted to make, because I think I don't speak about scaling as much as I speak about integration and amplification, and that, I think, is what leads to scaling. And that also includes, bringing in different types of cities and different stakeholders. And that, I think, that process for next COP, we should have a cookbook-a-thon, and it should be also virtual, where we have, cities that I grew up in Northern Ontario, with Indigenous populations participating. This isn't just a north-south interface. This is about integration of different stakeholders and different types of cities around the world. And then I think, the third point, of course, is finance, and that has to be an overarching element. It's not just one of the equipments or its ingredients. It's really, all of this is integrated. The data that comes in and out also feeds into the type of finance that we can unleash, and I think that is central. But I think Pietro's practical approach here in Europe is also something that we hope to be amplifying, and the tools that he's building will also help to provide that type of integration.
Pietro, last question to you. I think you can build on Katherine's answer, but also thanks for having that practical example. I think we need far more in the months to come to really go to the next COP and say, if we want to demonstrate but also scale, how do you see indeed using practical examples and getting them into the process?
No, thanks so much. And I think we are one example of the so many successful ones that are currently happening. There is just a lot happening, and we, as you say, we need to create that environment where we really learn from each other. But when it comes to gathering data and creating those data lakes that are needed for the financial sector to understand how they can then bring the capital into these type of projects, this is what really key, and this is what I see that is really, let's say, we are at the upsurge of it. There is a lot of work of gathering data to create those links, those metrics, those understandable narratives that are not only, let's say, qualitative, but are really quantitative, that can show quantifiable environmental outcomes in a economic profitable way. And this is, let's say, where I see the bridge between the digitalization of the data collection and the financial bridge that we need to have. And I think maybe, yes, COP next year will be really looking at some of these results and how to, again, scale them, make them as user-friendly, as adaptable, and fruitable to everyone out there, and not just keeping it in silos. In the end, we have so many tools to share and to bring everybody on the same page that we really need to pivot those. So with that, we really look forward to the next COP to be the one where we scale, as Katherine mentioned.
Thank you very much. Masamba, we're at the end of our session. I would like to thank you especially, but also, of course, the whole UGIH team for providing that space, for allowing us to cook and sometimes come up with a wrong recipe or menu, something which is totally not inedible, but at least provides the hope that we will improve and get there. Looking at next year's COP, when do we have fulfilled your expectations as a cooking crew?
I would like first to thank the member of the working group for your amazing work. And this work is extremely important moving forward for the Global Innovation Hub, because for us it was very important to understand how can we, in a structured manner, engage with key stakeholders, among which cities are a critical one. It was very important for us to see how can we engage with them and work with them so that we can start achieving some of the goals that we are targeting by COP28, because we would like at COP28 to move from, let's say, plan to actually concrete product on the table for demonstration. So one of the things that is really important moving forward is to see how we can bring together all the key actors, those that are at the demand for solution side, those that have needs that they would like to satisfy, those that can provide solution for the satisfaction of the need, and as it was mentioned, financial, because if we do not have financial around the table, we'll not be able to achieve our objective. So one of the key deliverables we would like to have for COP28 is to have at least 5 to 10 deals where we have those that are at the demand side, cities with their needs, and then solution providers that can provide solution for the satisfaction of this need, and financial that are willing to invest for the development or upscale deployment of this solution. If we are able to have at COP28 around 5 to 10 of such a deal that are already in place, even if they are not yet implemented, it would be a great move forward. But really, we would like now to move from just describing how we will work together, describing our intent, our purpose, our objective, and then the strategies that we would like to put in place. All these things are very nice, but I think now we have a very good common understanding of that. Now we need really to take off by putting on the table a concrete demonstration that these ideas make sense. The cookbook is a very important instrument, but we should not consider that this is something easy. When you were presenting it, I was thinking that's a very nice concept, very powerful process, but we need to be mindful that we will be all, let's say, chief at the restaurant and consumer. So I was just exploring for the cities, who are their clients, for whom they are preparing menu, probably for their citizen, and also for the planet. They are preparing menu for these two main consumer. For the Global Innovation Hub, we are also chief. For whom are we preparing the menu? For those that are at the demand side, for solution provider, but also for financial. And how can we attract and make attractive the Global Innovation Hub for all these clients that we are targeting? How can we make attractive the Global Innovation Hub for those that are looking for solution to address their demand? How can we make it attractive to the solution provider? And also, how can we make it attractive for financial, as well as other enabler that can make things happen? If you are able to identify for all the key players who are their client, and how can they put in place a system that will satisfy their client, then I think we will have the right response. So thank you again for your contribution, and looking forward to strengthen our collaboration to achieve the objective that I have just mentioned, 10 deal in place by COP28. Thank you.
So, good morning, good morning. We are jumping to the next session. This is the last session of the day. This is the closing ceremony of the Global Innovation Hub. It's a privilege to kick off this closing session. Next slide, please. What I would like to do is to wrap up a little bit the sessions that we have before. We will be walking you through some of the key highlights and give you some of the stats and the facts that we have collected over these 2 weeks. Okay. Do you hear me now? Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So we are at the end of the 2 weeks. It's been a fantastic experience. We have a very rich program. More than, as you can see, we had more than 85 sessions. We also contributed with parallel side events and other activities during the 2 weeks at COP27 here in Sharm el-Sheikh, starting on the 7th of November and closing on the 18th of November. We launched a digital platform. This has been one of the key features of the sessions on the first week. During these 2 weeks, the sessions were streamed over the COP27 platform. They were also broadcasted through YouTube channels, and we produce a dedicated website. So the materials, the outcomes of the dialogues, the reflections, they are all made available to your disposal. We have more than 100 hours of streaming. Some activities were provided in parallel and videos connected to our website. And we counted more than 400 speakers. And one of the highlights is really the expansion that we have on the on-site speakers that spoke here at these panels, and also the remote participants that connected online. With Sylvia, we were doing some estimates and counting through sampling the participation of Global South, but also the participation of gender balance, female speakers. We counted like approximately the balance was 50-50. So I think we made a very good improvement in those terms from our previous dialogues. And we also have a rich composition of countries coming from different regions across the world, different circumstances, national circumstances, and we also have an increased presence of Global South. We still have to work on bringing more Global South voices at the next COP, but I think it was a great improvement from the previous sessions. More than 270 organizations came, join us, spoke at this pavilion, and we are very proud to announce that. And we also participated, as I was mentioning, on parallel sessions. We have conducted 2 side events under the formal UNFCCC process, and we conducted or spoke at 8 different sessions, particularly Masamba. He was invited to so many sessions, while we had the sessions in Glasgow, from Glasgow to Sharm el-Sheikh this year. One important feature as well when it comes to communication was the presence in the UNFCCC website, the COP27 platforms that also help us to outreach the scope of the dialogues and the outcomes of them. I'd like to take the opportunity also to thank very much the government of British Columbia, who have helped us developing rich materials in terms of communication assets, and also thank our colleague from the comms team, Cody, who's been instrumental in putting these articles together. Next slide. So maybe this is a message that all this information is very, very well elaborated. We have put a lot of efforts classifying the sessions so that they are searchable and they are user-friendly. So please go to our website. You will find the different elements and the different links to not only to the live streams, but also to the materials that are associated to the dialogue, such as agendas, and we will put as well the final report. Each one of the sessions will have a short summary report on who spoke and what was the main outcome. Next slide, please. This is only to give you a flavor of some of the deliverables. In the previous session, we say we were jumping from dialogues, from validating some of the assumptions of the framework that the Innovation Hub is putting together, and now we have concrete deliverables, many launches, many products that were announced here that will be taken forward in a form of work program to COP28. Some of them, just to mention a few, is the launching of the virtual platform that will help us to collect demand from key actors, for example, cities, but we also have 3 important progress on concrete theme or thematic things connected to shelter. We have bamboo, the work on bamboo, then we have on food and nutrition the work under the high-level working group looking at beans production and ecosystems, and then under access we have the energy transition looking into potential for green hydrogen. Next slide, please. This is an example of our Trello board. Visit our website. Most of the visual assets, most of the tweets, the LinkedIn articles, and the photos will be made available on this Trello. It's already expanding exponentially. You will see a lot of actions happening, and more importantly, the videos, the recording, the reports of these 2-week sessions are already available on the Trello board. Next, please. So we also have a dedicated site. This is the example. If you Google UNFCCC Innovation, it will take us to the Global Innovation Hub website, and there you have a link to the COP27 website. And again, this is containing all the information that I was presenting before, including the elements from the Trello board. Next one. This is the YouTube links. You will see the sessions that are recorded on YouTube, but also on the COP27 platform. So we have a broad reach of audiences. One is within the context of the negotiation, but also any audience or any particular stakeholder can access to the YouTube stream of the sessions, and that will be very easy to find through the website. Next slide, please. Now, what I would like to do is we have prepared a collection of pictures, moments that we have experienced during these 2 weeks. Fantastic experiences, very high-level speakers, and also very relevant and impactful sessions. So we just wanted to give some flavor of the key moments of this 2 weeks COP by sharing with you a few of the pictures of the sessions. So if you can run them through, that will be appreciated, and you will see some of the key moments of the session. Thank you so much. This concludes the photo session. I'm very, very happy to thank, on behalf of the Global Innovation, to our colleagues. They did a fantastic job. To our colleagues from T-Systems, our colleagues from GL, and all the colleagues that are within the team in the UNFCCC. But I think we're looking forward to the closing words of Masamba Choji. Masamba Choji, thank you very much for taking us to this point, for your vision, and for translating this into this fantastic 2 weeks at COP27. The floor is yours.
So thank you, Carlos. So first of all, I would like to invite, Carlos, you can stay. Sylvia, Pana, just come here on board. Yeah, I would like first to thank and recognize the great contribution of my colleagues. So actually, these are the ones who make things possible. We all know that the work has to be done on the ground. We need to have people that will put their hand on the ground and make things move forward. They are the ones who were behind this 85 session at COP. 85 sessions, this is not a small thing. So thank you for your great contribution. Thank you to those that have also supported us in terms of logistics. The first day there was some difficulties, but quickly they catch up, and now we had excellent services. Yeah, thank you for your contribution. And I would like also to thank all the participants to our different sessions, the speakers, our core partner, and our new partners that also came and joined this fantastic movement. So I'm closing this session, this COP27 dialogue, but at the same time, I'm opening the door for the next journey, for COP28. The door is open, and we are inviting all people to join this fantastic movement, which purpose, again, I would like to reiterate it, is to explore how innovation can be best used to serve people and the planet. So this is a noble endeavor. So this is something that is exciting, and this is something also that is inspiring. And we are really looking forward to have a broad movement joining us to push forward this agenda and ensure that we can use innovation in an effective manner to serve people and planet. So at COP27, we achieved quite important milestone. You have shared some of these. At COP28, we have defined clear deliverables that we would like to achieve. Now, I know that after COP, we have 2 days to rest a little bit, but right after, we need to start working for COP28, and we invite all our partners to join. So thank you. Sorry? Yeah, and we would like also to thank our champion within the UNFCCC Secretariat, within the organizations that has put a lot of effort in supporting the work that we are doing, including our Deputy Executive Secretary, Ovez, who without managing effort has pushed to move forward the Global Innovation Hub and has helped achieve the important outcome that we have at COP27. So looking forward to continuing to work together. As I have mentioned, next week we will start the work for COP28. The journey will start, and hopefully we'll have all our partners and new partners joining for this exciting journey. Thank you. Bye.